Marcus Reed's breath crystallized in the 15-degree air as he stood on the fifth-floor scaffolding, feeding 12-gauge copper wire through a conduit junction. The construction site sprawled beneath him, steel beams jutting like ribs from concrete workers scattered across levels, the rhythmic hammering of progress echoing off nearby buildings. His hands calloused and scarred from 15 years of electrical work. Moved with practiced efficiency despite the cold, no gloves. The pair he'd owned for 3 years had finally split at the seams last Tuesday, and $47 stretched thin. When rent demanded $850, the church volunteer appeared at the scaffold's edge, middle-aged and earnest in a black puffer jacket embroidered with St. Michael's outreach. He clutched a yellow envelope like a lifeline. "Excuse me, sir. We're helping families before Thanksgiving. $500 grocery voucher, no strings attached." Marcus straightened, wiping sweat from his forehead despite the cold. Around him, other workers slowed their tasks, watching. The envelope represented food for weeks. Meat instead of peanut butter. Fresh vegetables instead of canned. Ethan's face when Marcus could finally say yes to something. Appreciate it, but give it to someone who needs it more. The volunteer blinked, confused. "Brother, you're working in this cold without proper gear, I think." Marcus's jaw tightened, but his voice stayed level. "I'm not struggling, friend. I'm working. Struggling is when you quit. Working is when you fight, and I fight every single day." The words hung in the frozen air. The volunteer nodded, slowly understanding something unspoken, and descended the scaffolding. Marcus turned back to the conduit, threading wire with movements sharp enough to hide the tremor in his fingers. Behind him, Owen Sullivan whistled low. "Dude, that was $500. Marcus didn't turn. "I know what it was. You got $47 till Friday's check. I saw your bank notification when your phone lit up. Mind your business, Owen. Your business is my business when you're being stupid proud." Owen moved closer, voice dropping. "Jake and me could spot you till—" "No. Marcus, I said no." Marcus's knuckles whitened around the wire cutters. "I don't take handouts, not from churches, not from friends, not from anybody." Owen exhaled frustration into steam. "That's not pride, man. That's what I need to teach my son." Marcus finally turned, meeting Owen's eyes. "Ethan watches everything I do, every choice. If I teach him to take what's offered instead of earning what's owed, what kind of man does he become?" Before Owen could respond, the foreman's voice cut across the site. Rick Drummond, 55 and perpetually stressed, gathered the crew near the ground-level trailer. Marcus climbed down each rung of the scaffold ladder, a small defeat. He knew what was coming. December always brought cuts. Rick's clipboard caught the weak winter sun. "Listen up. Corporate's tightening budgets. This project wraps Friday. After that, we're laying off 40%. Murmurs rippled through the assembled workers. Marcus's stomach dropped, but his face revealed nothing. "Union guys, stay. Contractors go first, sorry." Marcus was a contractor, had been since quitting Commonwealth Edison 4 years ago, to care for Lily when the cancer came. The stable job, the benefits, the security, all sacrificed for 18 months watching his wife die by inches. And now the price of that sacrifice compounded daily, a debt that never stopped accruing. "Questions?" Rick scanned the crowd, guilty and defensive. Nobody spoke. "All right, back to work." Owen caught Marcus's elbow as the crew dispersed. "Dude, I can talk to Rick, maybe." "It's fine." Marcus pulled free. "I'll find something." In December, construction's dead till March. Marcus knew. Every electrician in Chicago knew. Winter meant scrambling for the few indoor jobs, competing with hundreds of others for scraps. But acknowledging that reality meant acknowledging defeat, and defeat wasn't something he could afford. At lunch, Marcus sat alone on a steel beam overlooking the Chicago River, eating half a peanut butter sandwich. The other half waited in his jacket for dinner. His phone screen cracked into a spiderweb pattern displayed photos he'd memorized but couldn't stop viewing. Lily in her simple white dress on courthouse steps, June 2015. Both of them young and stupid with hope. Lily pregnant hands cradling the bump that would become Ethan's catching her wedding ring. Lily in Northwestern Memorial's maternity ward, exhausted and radiant, holding their newborn son with an expression of pure wonder. Lily skeletal and bald, Ethan asleep in her lap 1 week before she stopped breathing. That last photo showed her looking directly at the camera at Marcus with eyes that said everything words couldn't. Take care of him. Promise me. Don't let this break you. He'd promised. Kept promising every morning when the alarm shattered whatever fractured sleep he'd managed. Kept promising when Ethan asked why they couldn't afford things other kids had. Kept promising when landlords delivered eviction notices and collection agencies called about medical bills that would outlive him. Marcus closed the photos and returned to work, threading wire through conduit like sutures through a wound that wouldn't heal. 45 miles north, Victoria Blackwood stood at the window of her 47th floor office watching boats cut white wakes across Lake Michigan's steel-gray surface. Behind her, 8 senior partners waited in the conference room, their collective anxiety a tangible pressure against her back. She made them wait another 30 seconds, long enough to establish dominance, short enough to avoid childish pettiness before turning. The conference room was all glass and steel, minimalist aesthetic that screamed power through absence. Victoria took her seat at the head movements precise as a surgeon's. Her Tom Ford suit had cost more than most people earned in a month. The Patek Philippe on her wrist could feed a family for a year. She wore both with the casual indifference of someone who'd forgotten what poverty felt like. Michael Henderson, the CFO, launched into his presentation about environmental, social, and governance investing. Buzzwords and feel-good metrics wrapped around mediocre returns. Victoria listened without expression, her pale blue eyes tracking numbers on the projector with predatory focus. Projected 6 to 7% annually, but the PR value... What's the ROI? Victoria's voice cut through the presentation like a blade through silk. Michael fumbled his clicker. 6 to 7% as I mentioned, but the S&P 500 averaged 11% over the past decade. You're asking me to approve a $50 million investment that underperforms the market by 40%. Explain why I should care about PR value when our fiduciary duty is to maximize returns. The ethical considerations. Victoria leaned forward and the temperature in the room dropped. Conscience doesn't pay dividends, Michael. I don't run a charity, I run a business, and businesses exist for one purpose, generating returns for shareholders. If your proposal can't beat a basic index fund, don't waste my time pitching it as innovation. Silence. Michael's face flushed red, but he said nothing. Nobody ever did. Victoria Blackwood's reputation as the ice queen of Chicago finance wasn't hyperbole, it was survival strategy. Show weakness in this industry and they'd tear you apart. She'd learned that lesson early, watching men with half her intelligence and twice her arrogance command rooms. Simply because they were men, so she'd become colder, sharper, more ruthless than any of them. And it worked. The meeting concluded with Michael's proposal tabled indefinitely. As the partners filed out, Victoria remained at the window watching the city below. Inside her chest, something heavy and ugly churned. She'd meant every word about maximizing returns, but the look on Michael's face, shame and humiliation, reminded her of Graham watching their father berate him for choosing welding over college. Different circumstances, same fundamental cruelty. Her assistant knocked. Thomas Crawford, 35 and unfailingly professional, held an iPad like a shield. Ms. Blackwood, there's a homeless veteran outside the building again. Security wants to know. Victoria's hand tightened imperceptibly on her coffee cup. Give him $100 and the card for Veterans Haven on West Madison. Discreetly. Tom's eyebrows rose fractionally. Ma'am, you heard me. Yes, ma'am. He retreated and Victoria was alone. The photos she kept in her desk drawer hidden from everyone, even herself most days, called to her. She resisted for 3 minutes before giving in. Graham's face smiled up at her from glossy paper frozen in time at 17. They were teenagers in the photo before their father left. Before money became survival instead of comfort. Before cancer turned her brother into a cautionary tale about the cruelty of economic Darwinism. Graham Blackwood died at 32 because he couldn't afford treatment. That simple. That brutal. Stage 3 lung cancer from welding fumes, no insurance because contractors didn't get benefits, and $180,000 standing between life and death. Victoria had been in business school with $12,000 saved. She'd offered it all. Graham refused, telling her to invest in her future instead of his past. 6 months later, he was gone, and Victoria had spent the next decade building an empire on the foundation of that guilt. The question that haunted her, the one she'd spent 10 years and 15 test subjects trying to answer. Did Graham deserve to die poor? Were poor people poor because they made bad choices or because the system was fundamentally broken? If Graham had been given unlimited resources, would he have used them wisely or squandered them? Like so many others, 14 out of 15 test subjects had failed her. Given money without restrictions, they'd bought televisions and vacations and designer clothes, everything except stability. Only one woman, a single mother, had spent every dollar on her children's needs. But $500 wasn't a real test. It wasn't enough to reveal true character. Victoria needed something definitive. Someone like Graham had been hardworking, struggling through no fault of their own, facing impossible choices with dignity. And she needed to give them enough rope to either climb out of poverty or hang themselves with greed. She called Tom back in. I need you to find someone for me. What kind of someone? Victoria stared at Graham's photo, seeing the ghost of the brother who'd raised her when their father wouldn't. Someone who reminds me of someone I lost. The Greyhound terminal on Harrison Street smelled like diesel fuel and desperation. Victoria hadn't intended to stop here. Her calendar showed a clear P from office to penthouse. But the canceled meeting created a vacuum, and Tom needed a restroom break, and sometimes fate operated through mundane necessity. She stood beside the Mercedes, watching passengers flow through the terminal's glass doors. Families with overstuffed luggage, teenagers with headphones and hostile expressions, an elderly couple moving with careful synchronization, decades of partnership visible in every matched step. Victoria studied them all with clinical detachment, searching for something she couldn't name. Then she saw them. The man emerged first, shoulders set against invisible weight hand. Protective on the boy's shoulder. The child, 7 or 8, small for his age, wore a jacket too thin for November and shoes held together with hope and duct tape. They moved through the crowd like swimmers through molasses, exhausted but still swimming. Victoria's breath caught. The man's jacket was Carhartt tan canvas worn to softness. Graham had owned that exact jacket, worn it until the cuffs frayed and the lining tore. The way the man walked, purposeful despite obvious fatigue, matched Graham's gait so precisely it hurt. And when he knelt to speak to the boy, touching the child's face with rough, gentle hands, Victoria saw her brother so clearly she almost called his name. They settled on a wooden bench near the vending machines. Victoria moved closer, positioning herself behind a concrete pillar where she could observe without being seen. The boy was complaining, voice high and petulant with exhaustion. Why do we have to sit here? Why can't we take the bus like normal kids? The man's response was patient but worn thin. Ethan, you know why. We're saving money. Saving for what? We never buy anything anyway. The boy's voice rose, drawing glances from nearby passengers. Tommy says we're poor, and he's right. Victoria watched the man's jaw tighten, saw the flash of pain quickly suppressed. He didn't argue, didn't defend, just sat there absorbing his son's anger like it was something he deserved. Ethan pointed at the vending machines with aggressive desperation. I'm hungry. Tommy and Brandon bring snacks every day. Why can't I? The man said nothing for a long moment. Then he reached into his jacket, pulled out his wallet, and opened it. Even from her position, Victoria could see it was nearly empty. He extracted a $5 bill, crumpled and worn, and held it like it weighed more than paper should. The man studied that bill with an expression Victoria recognized from her own mirror on bad nights. Calculation, sacrifice, the algebra of survival where every choice demanded something you couldn't afford to lose. Then he handed it to his son. Ethan snatched it without thanks and ran to the machines. Victoria's chest tightened with something uncomfortably close to anger at the child's entitlement. But she kept watching. The boy returned with Doritos and Sprite, tearing into the chips with single-minded focus. After several bites, he looked up at his father, seemed to notice for the first time that the man wasn't eating anything. The boy's expression shifted, guilt replacing selfishness. Dad, you have to eat too. The man shook his head, something like a smile touching his mouth. I'm full, buddy. Ethan's face crumpled. He knew his father was lying. Every child knows when their parent is lying about hunger. He stood abruptly, holding the bag up with both hands. No, you're lying. You haven't eaten anything. Other passengers turned to stare. The man's face flushed with embarrassment, but his voice stayed calm. Ethan, please, sit down. You have to eat. The boy's voice cracked on the last word, tears threatening. The man took a single chip, ruffled Ethan's hair with a gentleness that contradicted the hardness of his hands. The boy nodded, satisfied in the way children are when they've won a meaningless battle, and swooped down to finish his snacks. Victoria watched the man fold his hands in his lap and study his son with an expression that defied simple categorization. Not sadness, though sadness lived in it. Not resignation, though resignation shaped its edges. Something deeper, love, mixed with failure, devotion, tangled with guilt, determination, forged in the crucible of inadequacy. This man had given his son his last $5 and was going hungry to do it. No complaints, no martyrdom, just quiet sacrifice performed in a bus station because that's what fathers do when the world offers no better options. Tom returned, keys jingling. Victoria raised one hand, wait, without taking her eyes off the man and boy. She needed to know more, needed to understand who they were and why this stranger's pain felt like her own history bleeding through time. They stood, the boy still eating the man's hand, finding his son's shoulder again with that same protective instinct. They moved toward the exit, and Victoria made a decision that would have seemed insane if she'd stopped to consider it. She followed. Tom started to speak, but Victoria's expression silenced him. He followed too, maintaining the careful distance of someone who'd learned when to question his employer and when to simply obey. The streets of South Loop wore their poverty with grim resignation. Marcus and Ethan walked west on Harrison, navigating cracked sidewalks and graffitied storefronts. The Mercedes trailed a block behind, anonymous among the evening traffic. After 2 blocks, Ethan began complaining again. I'm tired. Can't we take the bus? Marcus's response was lost in distance, but his posture spoke volumes. Shoulders set, pace steady, determination overriding exhaustion. They passed Ferrara Bakery on Taylor Street, and Ethan stopped so abruptly Marcus nearly stumbled. The boy pressed his face against the display window. Breath-fogging glass that separated him from towers of cannoli and elaborate birthday cakes. Dad, Tommy had his party last week. They got a cake from here. I've never had a birthday cake. Marcus knelt and Victoria lost sight of his face as he spoke to his son. She could imagine the words, though. Could hear Graham's voice from 20 years ago telling her they couldn't afford new school clothes, but that didn't mean they were less than anyone else. The boy's shoulders shook, crying or trying not to, and Marcus wiped tears with his thumb before standing. The boy looked back at the bakery once more before following his father down the street. And Victoria felt something crack in her chest. She'd bought a $3,000 suit last week without blinking. This man couldn't afford his son a birthday cake. 4 blocks later, Ethan's steps faltered. He was limping, slightly exhausted beyond complaining. Marcus noticed immediately, crouching low. The boy climbed onto his father's back without being asked, small arms circling the man's neck. Marcus stood adjusting the weight with practiced ease and continued walking. Victoria noted the physical capability. This wasn't a desk worker softened by sedentary life. This was a body built by labor, strong enough to carry 70 pounds of child plus a backpack after 10 hours of work without visible strain. Blue-collar strength. Graham's kind of strength. They arrived at 847 South Halsted Street as dusk bled into dark. The building was exactly what Victoria expected: 3 stories of broken promises and deferred maintenance, brick facade crumbling at the corner's windows. Patched with tape graffiti declaring territorial claims in spray-painted hieroglyphics. This was where people lived when society's safety net had too many holes, and they were too proud to ask for help they'd never receive anyway. Marcus set Ethan down, fumbling for keys. Before they went inside, the boy turned back, looking down the street directly toward where Victoria's Mercedes idled. She dropped below the dashboard by instinct, heart hammering with adrenaline she hadn't felt in years. When she risked another glance, they'd vanished inside. Tom kept the engine running, waiting for instructions that didn't come. Victoria stared at the building, memorizing its address. Its decay, the way light leaked from windows where people lived despite everything. Graham had lived somewhere like this. She'd visited once, pretending everything was fine while roaches scattered across countertops and water stains bloomed across ceilings like malignant fluors. She'd cried in the parking lot afterward, hating herself for leaving him there. Hating him for refusing her money, hating a world that could let good people die slowly in buildings that should have been condemned. "Ma'am." Tom's voice was careful. "Should we go?" Victoria's jaw tightened. "I need a complete background check on whoever lives in Unit 3C. Everything. Employment history, financial records, family situation, criminal history, if any. By 6 a.m. tomorrow." Tom's reflection in the rearview mirror showed surprise. "Ma'am, I'm not an investigator." "Then hire one. I don't care what it costs. I need comprehensive information by 6 a.m. "Yes, ma'am." Tom pulled into traffic and Victoria watched the building shrink in the side mirror until distance erased it entirely. The drive to her penthouse passed in silence. Tom knew better than to make conversation when Victoria's face took on that particular expression, focused and distant, calculating probabilities in equations he couldn't see. She'd built a $380 million empire on that focus. But tonight it wasn't business calculations spinning through her mind. It was Graham's face in the hospital telling her to leave, to not waste her future on his past. It was the man's hands folding in his lap as he watched his children eat the food he'd just bought with his last $5. It was the question she'd been asking for 10 years. Do good people stay good when given everything they lack? Her penthouse occupied the entire 68th floor of the Four Seasons private residences on East Delaware Place. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed Chicago's glittering night sprawl like a painting Victoria had commissioned through Wealth and Will. The furniture was museum-quality, mid-century modern. The art was investment-grade contemporary. Everything perfect, everything expensive, everything hollow. Victoria poured wine she didn't drink and stood at the window until the city's lights blurred into abstract patterns. Somewhere out there, the man whose name she didn't know was putting his son to bed in an apartment that probably had heat problems and probably had roaches and definitely cost more than he could afford. And tomorrow Victoria would know everything about him, every mistake, every debt, every choice that led to that bus station and that $5 bill. Then she would test him, give him enough resources to change his life, or destroy it depending on who he really was beneath the surface. And finally, after 10 years and 14 failures and Graham's ghost haunting every decision, she would have her answer. She didn't sleep. Instead, she sat in her home office staring at Graham's photo until dawn bled through the darkness and her phone buzzed with an incoming email. The subject line read, "Background check complete. Victoria opened the attachment. 47 pages. She began reading. Marcus James Reed, 41 years old, widowed, one dependent, licensed electrician working freelance after quitting a stable position at Commonwealth Edison to care for his dying wife. Medical debt of $142,000, credit score that made loans impossible. 3 eviction notices in 2 years. Current rent 14 days overdue. The details accumulated like evidence in a trial. Army Reserves deployed to Iraq, honorable discharge. Apprenticeship through the electrical union. Journeyman license. Good reviews at ComEd before everything fell apart. His wife Lily diagnosed with stage 3 breast cancer in February 2020. Treatment costs $120,000 out of pocket after Medicaid coverage. Savings $8,000. Marcus quit his job to provide full-time care. And then the detail that made Victoria close her laptop and press her palms against her eyes. Lily had declined treatment. The medical records obtained through methods Victoria chose not to examine too closely included a doctor's note. Patient declining recommended treatment course due to financial constraints. Patient states preserving savings for minor child is priority. Lily Reed had chosen to die. Not because she wanted to, but because keeping her son fed mattered more than keeping herself alive. And Marcus had spent the last 3 years trying to honor that sacrifice while drowning in debt and poverty and the weight of being a single father in a system designed to break people like him. Victoria read through the rest, the volunteer work at the VA hospital, the neighbors' testimonials about how Marcus fixed things for free. The teacher's notes about Ethan falling asleep in class from hunger. Every detail painted the same picture, a good man being crushed by circumstances he couldn't control, maintaining dignity through sheer stubborn will. The investigator's final assessment. This is ideal candidate for whatever test you have in mind. Subject exhibits extraordinary character under extreme duress. Unlikely to abuse financial windfall, more likely to use responsibly for family stability. Victoria opened her safe and removed the American Express Centurion card. Matte black, heavier than plastic, should be linked to $5 million in discretionary funds with no preset spending limit. She placed it on her desk beside Graham's photo. Is this what you wanted, Graham? Is this the answer? Graham smiled from frozen time, eternally 17, eternally optimistic, eternally dead. Victoria wrote the note in her precise script, Mr. Reed. 24 hours, no limit, no questions, no consequences. Use however you want. When time expires, return card or keep it your choice. Clock starts when you accept. VB. She sealed everything in an envelope and called Tom. Cancel my meetings. I need you to drive me to a construction site downtown. At 10:30 Tuesday morning, Victoria stood outside the chain-link fence surrounding the construction site where Marcus Reed worked. Tom waited in the Mercedes engine, running ready for quick departure if necessary. This was insane. Victoria Blackwood didn't make house calls, didn't chase test subjects. Didn't put herself in situations where she couldn't control every variable, but she needed to see his face when she made the offer. Needed to watch his eyes and judge whether the man from the bus station was real, or just another performance for an audience of strangers. She spotted him on the 5th-floor scaffolding feeding wire through conduit with economical movements that spoke of years. Doing exactly this, his jacket was the same Carhartt from yesterday. His boots were held together with duct tape, and when he descended for the water break, she stepped forward. Marcus Reed. He turned wariness immediate. His eyes brown, tired, intelligent, assessed her in seconds. Expensive coat, expensive bag, someone from a different world entirely. Do I know you? Victoria extended the envelope, heart-pounding in a way board meetings never produced. My name is Victoria Blackwood. I have a proposition for you. He didn't take it. I don't do anything illegal. Nothing illegal. I want to give you something. I don't take charity. The words came out harsh, defensive, and Victoria recognized the pride that would make this difficult. This isn't charity. It's an experiment. What kind of experiment? Victoria explained the parameters. 24 hours, unlimited credit card, no restrictions, no questions, no consequences, spend whatever he wanted on whatever he chose. After the time expired, return the card or keep it, his decision. Marcus stared at the envelope like it might explode. What's the catch? No catch. Nobody does this. His jaw tightened. What do you want from me? I want to see what you do, that's all. Why me? Victoria met his eyes, saw Graham looking back at her from different features. Because you remind me of someone I lost. Silence stretched between them, broken only by construction noise and distant traffic. Marcus didn't move, didn't reach for the envelope, didn't speak. Victoria could see the calculations running behind his eyes. Suspicion, desperation, pride warring with necessity. Finally, this is some kind of joke. I assure you it's not. People don't just hand out unlimited credit cards to strangers. I do, when I want to understand something. Victoria lowered the envelope slightly. I had a brother, Graham. He died 10 years ago. Good man, hard worker, got sick, couldn't afford treatment. I was in school, couldn't help him. He died poor, and I've spent every day since asking myself if he deserved that. If poor people are poor because they're irresponsible or if the system is broken, you strike me as someone who could answer that question. Marcus's expression shifted, anger fading into something more complex. So I'm a lab rat, a test to prove your dead brother deserved to die. The words hit harder than Victoria expected. No, that's not. What then? You want to watch me scramble for scraps so you can feel better about having money? I want to know if good people stay good when they have resources, or if poverty is the only thing keeping them honest. Marcus's laugh was bitter. You think poverty makes people honest? Lady Poverty makes people desperate, makes them angry, makes them compromise and sacrifice and sometimes break, but honest. He shook his head. That's not about money. That's about who you are when nobody's watching. Victoria's chest tightened. Graham had said something similar years ago. Money doesn't change people, Tori. It just reveals what was always there. Marcus looked at the envelope again, then at Victoria. If I say yes, you'll leave me alone, no strings, no expectations. Just use the card however you want for 24 hours, that's all. And you'll be watching. Victoria didn't lie. Yes. Why should I trust you? You shouldn't. But your rent is due Friday and you're short $500. Your son needs winter clothes. You haven't eaten a full meal in 3 days. And pride doesn't keep children warm. Victoria held the envelope steady. 24 hours, Mr. Reed. Then we're done. Marcus stared at her for a long moment. Then he took the envelope, fingers brushing hers briefly. When does it start? Victoria checked her watch. 2 p.m. today. You have until 2 p.m. tomorrow. And if I don't use it, then you don't. Marcus pocketed the envelope without opening it. His expression remained guarded, suspicious, but underneath Victoria saw desperation winning the war against pride. He nodded once and turned back toward the scaffolding, ending the conversation without another word. Victoria returned to the Mercedes, hands shaking slightly with adrenaline she didn't want to acknowledge. Tom glanced at her in the rearview mirror but knew better than to ask questions. The test had begun. In 4 hours, Marcus Reed would either prove Victoria's hypothesis about human nature, or he would shatter every assumption she'd built over 10 years of trying to understand why Graham had to die. She settled into the leather seat and activated the credit card's tracking app on her phone. Every transaction would ping immediately, itemized with timestamps and locations. She'd know exactly what Marcus Reed valued, exactly how he chose to spend unlimited resources when given the chance. And maybe finally she would have her answer. Marcus stood at the school's chain-link fence at 3 o'clock sharp, watching children pour from Lincoln Elementary's double doors like water breaking through a dam. Ethan emerged in the second wave. Backpack straps twisted, one shoe untied, jacket hanging off one shoulder. The boy's face brightened when he spotted his father. But the brightness dimmed quickly. Embarrassment replacing joy as other kids climbed into waiting cars while he walked toward the fence on foot. The envelope in Marcus's jacket pocket felt like it was burning through the fabric. He'd checked it 3 times during the afternoon, confirming the black card was real, the note authentic. The impossible offer actually happening. 2 hours had passed since Victoria Blackwood turned his world sideways. The clock was already running. Ethan reached the fence, coughing wetly. Marcus's trained eye caught the flush in his son's cheeks, the glassiness in his eyes. Fever building. "Hey, buddy, how was school?" Ethan shrugged, scrubbing at his nose with his sleeve. "Tommy said his dad's taking him to GameStop after school." "Can we go to GameStop?" Marcus's jaw tightened. "Not today, son. We never go anywhere." The complaint came out sharper than usual, frustration and fever combining into something ugly. "I hate being poor." The words landed like punches. Marcus knelt, checking Ethan's forehead with the back of his hand. Warm, definitely warm. "You're getting sick again. Let's get you home." They walked north on Halsted, Ethan shuffling beside him with visible misery. Every few steps brought another cough, each one deeper than the last. Marcus's mind raced through calculations. The leftover children's ibuprofen was down to maybe 2 doses. No thermometer, the last one broke in August. And Ethan's winter coat, if you could call it that, was really just a lined hoodie 2 sizes too small. They passed Target on Roosevelt Road and Ethan stopped abruptly. The storefront display showed mannequin children in puffy coats, warm and dry in their plastic perfection. "Dad, they have coats. My arms don't fit in mine anymore." Marcus looked at his son, looked at the store, felt the card in his pocket pulse like a second heartbeat. The rational part of his brain screamed trap, scam, too good to be true. But the desperate part, the part that had watched his son shiver through last winter, the part that remembered Lily's last words about taking care of Ethan no matter what, whispered different counsel. "Come on." Marcus pushed through the automatic doors before doubt could stop him. The store's warmth hit like a wall. Fluorescent lights and linoleum floors and families shopping with the casual abundance of people who didn't count every dollar. Marcus felt instantly, viscerally out of place. His work boots tracked dried mud. His jacket smelled like sweat and electrical fires. But Ethan's face lit up with something close to hope, and that was worth every uncomfortable second. Boys' clothing department. Winter coats. Marcus found a navy blue puffer with a hood size 8 on clearance for $39.99. He held it up and Ethan's eyes went wide. "Can I try it?" Marcus helped him into it, zipping it to the chin. The coat swallowed Ethan's small frame, but that was fine. He'd grow into it. The boy turned in a slow circle, testing movement, face splitting into a grin that punched straight through Marcus's defenses. "It's so warm." Marcus grabbed gloves, hat, then moved to the clothing racks, pulling shirts and pants while his brain screamed about pride and taking handouts and teaching his son the wrong lessons. But another voice, quieter, more desperate, reminded him that pride didn't keep children warm and lessons about self-sufficiency meant nothing if your son was cold. 10 minutes later, they stood at the pharmacy section. Marcus studied the children's medicine with the intensity of someone diffusing a bomb. Ibuprofen $8.99, cough syrup $6.99. He grabbed both, then added bandages, antibacterial ointment, a digital thermometer. First aid supplies they hadn't been able to afford since the last of Lily's medical equipment got repossessed. The shopping cart filled. Practical items, necessary items, nothing frivolous. Marcus moved through the store with military efficiency, grabbing only what Ethan needed, ignoring his own bare cupboards and empty closet. At checkout, the total flashed $326.38. Marcus's monthly grocery budget was $200. This single purchase exceeded what he normally spent in 6 weeks. His hands shook as he pulled out the black card, half expecting it to disintegrate like a magic trick revealed. The cashier swiped it. The machine beeped approval. Transaction complete. Marcus exhaled breath he didn't know he'd been holding. Ethan clutched the bags like treasure, already wearing the new coat despite the store's warmth. They walked out into Chicago's late afternoon cold. And for the first time in 3 years, Marcus's son wasn't shivering. 3 blocks away, Victoria sat in the Mercedes staring at her phone as the first notification arrived. Target, $326. She opened the itemized receipt, scanning each line with the clinical focus she brought to quarterly reports. Children's winter coat, gloves, hat, boys' clothing, medicine, first aid supplies, nothing for Marcus, every dollar spent on his son. Tom glanced at her from the driver's seat. "Ma'am?" Victoria silenced him with a raised hand. Mind spinning through implications. This was strategic, obviously strategic, buy necessities first to establish credibility. Then the real spending would start, electronics maybe, or paying off immediate debts, or something that revealed the selfishness she'd seen in 14 other test subjects. "Follow them." Her voice came out flat, professional, betraying nothing of the unease building in her chest. Tom pulled into traffic, maintaining careful distance. They tracked Marcus and Ethan to a Walgreens 2 blocks from the apartment. Victoria watched through tinted windows as father and son disappeared inside, emerging 8 minutes later with a small bag. Her phone buzzed. Walgreens. $47.83. The itemized list showed prescription-strength pain relievers, bandages, alcohol wipes, a thermometer, more medical supplies, more things for Ethan. Victoria's jaw tightened. The pattern was too consistent, too noble. People weren't this selfless. Not when given unlimited resources. She'd tested this 15 times. Watched people with real needs choose plasma televisions over paying rent. Designer shoes over their children's education. Marcus Reed was either the exception that proved her rule, or he was playing a longer game than the others. Tom cleared his throat. Should we continue following or continue? Victoria's fingers drummed against her thigh, the only outward sign of the anxiety crawling beneath her skin. "I need to see where this goes." Marcus and Ethan reached their building as dusk bled orange across the western sky. Victoria watched them climb the front steps, Ethan still wearing his new coat, Marcus carrying the bags like they contained something more precious than clothing and medicine. The building's front door closed behind them, and Victoria was left staring at peeling paint and broken windows, wondering what happened next. Inside Unit 3C, Marcus gave Ethan the fever reducer and cough syrup, then tucked him into bed despite it being only 5:30. The boy fell asleep almost immediately, new coat still on one hand, clutching the bag of shirts like a security blanket. Marcus sat on the edge of the mattress they shared, watching his son's chest rise and fall with each breath. The card sat on the kitchen counter, black and heavy and impossible. Marcus stared at it through the bedroom doorway, mind churning through implications. $374 spent, $876 remaining until he'd meet the goal of covering rent. But that wasn't the test, was it? Victoria Blackwood didn't care about his rent. She cared about character, about whether poor people deserved their poverty, about answering questions her dead brother couldn't. Marcus's phone buzzed. Owen. Dude, where'd you disappear to? Rick was looking for you. Marcus rubbed his eyes. Had to pick up Ethan. He's sick. Shit. He okay? Fever. I got him medicine. Marcus hesitated. Owen, you remember that woman from this morning? The one who gave me the envelope? The rich lady, yeah, what about her? She gave me a credit card, unlimited for 24 hours. Silence stretched so long, Marcus thought the connection dropped. Owen, are you insane? That's obviously a scam. I used it, bought stuff for Ethan, it worked. Marcus. Owen's voice went hard with concern. Think about this. Rich people don't hand out unlimited credit cards unless they want something. What does she want? Marcus looked at Ethan sleeping in his new coat. She wants to see what I do with it. That's messed up, man. You're not a science experiment. Maybe, but Ethan has a winter coat now, and medicine, and I've got 20 hours left to figure out what I owe for that. Owen sighed, defeated. Just be careful, all right? This smells wrong. After hanging up, Marcus made dinner ramen with an egg split between two bowls. He ate his portion standing at the counter, studying the card like it might reveal its secrets through sustained observation. The test was clear: prove you're deserving or prove you're just another taker. Use the resources wisely or squander them on selfish indulgence. But Marcus wasn't interested in proving anything to Victoria Blackwood. He was interested in survival, and if that meant using her guilt about her dead brother to buy his son a coat, so be it. At 7:45 Wednesday morning, Marcus woke to Ethan's coughing. The fever had broken during the night, but the cough remained deep and rattling, the kind that suggested something settling in lungs. Marcus checked the medicine supply, did the math. 3 doses left. Enough for today, not tomorrow. They ate oatmeal for breakfast. Marcus packed Ethan's lunch, peanut butter sandwich, bruised apple water, and walked him to school. The boy wore his new coat with visible pride, shoulders back, face turned toward classmates who usually ignored him. Tommy Sullivan, 8 years old and cruel with the casual cruelty of children who've never known want, stopped mid-conversation to stare. Nice coat, Reed. Ethan's voice came out stronger than Marcus had heard in months. Thanks. My dad got it for me. Marcus felt something crack in his chest, pride and pain mixing into an emotion he couldn't name. They reached the school entrance, and he knelt to zip the coat higher against the morning cold. If you feel worse, have Mrs. Rodriguez call me. Okay? Ethan nodded, then surprised Marcus by hugging him tight. Thanks for the coat, Dad. Marcus held his son, memorizing the moment, knowing it was purchased with someone else's money and would need to be repaid somehow, sometime, in ways he couldn't yet imagine. After Ethan disappeared into the school, Marcus walked to the construction site. Rick met him at the entrance, clipboard in hand, expression apologetic. Read, I need you to clear your tools. Today's your last day. Marcus had expected this, but expectation didn't soften the blow. Understood. I'm sorry, man. It's not personal. Everything was personal when you lived on the knife's edge. Marcus spent the morning finishing his section of electrical panel work, coiling wire with precision that was entirely unnecessary but gave his hands something to do while his mind raced. No work after Friday, rent due Friday, Ethan needing medicine food heat. At lunch, he sat alone and opened his phone's banking app. $47.18. Unemployment wouldn't start for weeks, even if he qualified, which was questionable given his contractor status. He had $300 in cash jobs lined up for next week, but that still left a $500 shortfall before the 1st of December. The card sat in his pocket, a solution to every problem if he was willing to accept solutions from people who saw him as a hypothesis to be tested. Marcus walked to the grocery store during afternoon break. The food situation at home had gone from bad to desperate. The oatmeal container was nearly empty. The bread moldy, the peanut butter scraped so thin, the jar showed through. He moved through aisles with the efficiency of someone who'd been poor long enough to know exactly which items stretched furthest. Milk a gallon, eggs 18 count, store brand bread 2 loaves, chicken legs family pack, rice 10 pounds. Frozen vegetables, peanut butter extra crunchy because Ethan preferred it, apples small bag. Cereal 1 box of Fruit Loops because his son deserved one thing that wasn't chosen purely for economy. The cart filled with a week's worth of meals. Marcus added coffee instant for himself, then paused at the end cap display showing candy bars. Ethan loved Snickers. They hadn't been able to afford candy in so long, Marcus couldn't remember the last time. He grabbed 2 bars, put them back, grabbed them again. This was ridiculous. They were $1 each, but that dollar could be part of the dollar that meant keeping the lights on, and luxury was for people who had the stability to indulge in it. Marcus left the candy bars and moved to checkout. $81.34. The card approved without hesitation. He loaded bags into his backpack and walked home during what would have been his afternoon work hours, knowing he'd just lost 4 hours of pay to buy groceries with someone else's money. Ethan came home on the school bus, a small victory that saved Marcus the 90-minute round trip. The boy's coat was smudged with playground dirt and what looked like jelly, but his face showed something Marcus hadn't seen in too long, the simple contentment of a child who'd spent the day warm enough to play instead of shivering through recess. "Can we have spaghetti?" Marcus looked at the chicken thawing on the counter. "Tomorrow. Tonight is chicken and rice." Ethan's face fell, but he didn't argue. Just went to the bedroom to do homework, new coat still on despite the apartment's questionable heat. Marcus started cooking, moving through familiar rhythms. Rinse rice, seasoned chicken, find the one pot that still had its handle attached. His phone buzzed twice with credit card notifications, but he ignored them. Victoria Blackwood could watch all she wanted. He was feeding his son. Dinner was quiet. Ethan picked at his food, still not feeling well, but managed most of a plate. Marcus scraped the leftovers into a container for tomorrow's lunch, washed dishes by hand, since the dishwasher had broken in August, and tried not to think about how much easier everything would be if he could keep the card for longer than 24 hours. That thought brought guilt crashing down. This was temporary, a test, not a solution. He couldn't build stability on someone else's charity, couldn't teach Ethan to depend on handouts instead of hard work. Lily had died to give their son a future built on their own foundations. And Marcus wouldn't dishonor that sacrifice by taking shortcuts. But when he tucked Ethan into bed that night and the boy asked if they could afford a real birthday cake next week, Marcus heard himself say yes before his brain could stop his mouth. and that lie felt worse than anything else he'd done with Victoria Blackwood's money. Thursday morning arrived with Marcus's internal alarm at 5:30. He lay in the dark listening to Ethan's breathing, calculating hours. The test started at 2 p.m. Tuesday. It was now 5:30 Thursday morning, 39.5 hours in, 8.5 remaining. He'd spent, Marcus did the math, $457.72 on necessities, on things his son needed to survive a Chicago winter and a father who couldn't provide through legitimate means. The guilt ate at him, but not as much as the relief, and that realization brought fresh guilt in a spiral he couldn't escape. At 8:15, Marcus walked to the corner bodega to buy the Tribune. $3.60 he didn't have paid for with Victoria's card, while the bodega owner Ahmed studied him with new suspicion. Marcus took the paper to a coffee shop somewhere. He never went because a cup cost what he budgeted for an entire day and ordered black coffee, $4.75. The server asked if he wanted anything to eat. Marcus looked at the muffins, calculated the cost, and felt his stomach cramp with hunger he'd been ignoring for 3 days. Just coffee. He sat by the window and opened the classified, circling electrical jobs with a pencil stub. 5 positions. All wanted credentials. He had experience he could prove, references he could provide. None mentioned salary, which meant they'd lowballed, and none would call him back once they ran a credit check and saw the destruction that medical debt had wrought on his financial life. Marcus was staring at the circled ads, trying to summon optimism from exhaustion, when the chair across from him scraped back. Victoria Blackwood sat down, uninvited, coffee of her own in hand. Expression unreadable behind sunglasses despite the indoor setting. "Mr. Reed." Marcus's spine went rigid. "You're following me." "I told you I would be. Told me you'd track purchases, not stalk me to coffee shops." Victoria removed the sunglasses and her pale blue eyes held something Marcus couldn't decipher. "I needed to see your face when I asked why you haven't bought anything for yourself." Marcus's jaw tightened. "That's not your business." "I made it my business when I gave you unlimited resources, $457 spent every cent on your son. Not a single personal item. Why? Because he needs things more than I do. Or because you're performing for an audience, establishing credibility before the real spending starts." The accusation landed like a slap. Marcus leaned forward, voice dropping to something dangerous. "You think this is performance? You think I'm playing some game for your benefit, lady? I don't care what you think about me. I care about my son having a coat that fits and medicine when he's sick. That's not strategy, that's survival." Victoria didn't flinch. 14 other people have failed this test. They all spent money on themselves within the first 6 hours. New clothes, fancy dinners, electronics they didn't need. You're different, and I need to understand why. Maybe they were honest, and I'm the liar. Maybe I'm just better at hiding selfishness. Marcus stood chair scraping loud enough to draw stares. Or maybe your test is flawed because you're assuming everyone operates from the same playbook. Some of us don't have the luxury of choosing between selfish and selfless. We just choose survival. He walked out, leaving the newspaper on the table, leaving Victoria sitting alone with her coffee and her questions. His hands shook with adrenaline and something that felt dangerously close to rage. How dare she judge his choices from her penthouse perspective? How dare she reduce his son's needs to data points in her grief-driven experiment? Marcus walked without destination, letting anger burn off through movement. He ended up at the public library on Roosevelt Road, a building he visited weekly because books were free and Ethan loved the children's section. He climbed the steps, pushed through heavy doors, and stood in the entrance hall trying to remember why he'd come. The children's section called to him through habit. Marcus wandered through the stacks, pulling books at random, picture books Ethan had outgrown. Chapter books slightly above his reading level, science books about how things worked. His son loved understanding mechanisms, asking questions about electricity and motors and why things did what they did. Marcus remembered his own childhood. His father teaching him to fix things, explaining that understanding how the world worked gave you power over it. That's what he wanted for Ethan, not wealth, not privilege, but the power that came from knowledge and skill and the confidence to fix what was broken. An idea formed. Marcus left the library and walked to Sullivan's Hardware on Ashland Avenue. Owen's uncle ran the place, and Owen sometimes worked weekends for extra cash. Marcus found him restocking drill bits in aisle 3. "Thought you were working today." Marcus shook his head. "Laid off. Last day was yesterday." Owen's face creased with genuine concern. "Damn man, I'm sorry. It's fine. I need a favor." "Name it." Marcus hesitated, pride warring with necessity. "There's a woman living in my building. Unit 12. Single mother, 2 kids. Her heat's been out for 3 weeks. I checked the furnace, it's shot. Needs to be replaced, which she can't afford, but I could fix it enough to work through winter if I had parts." Owen studied him. "You asking me to steal from my uncle?" "No. I'm asking if your uncle needs electrical work done. I'll trade labor for parts." Something shifted in Owen's expression, respect replacing concern. "I'll ask, but Marcus, how are you paying rent tomorrow if you're not working?" The question hung heavy between them. Marcus couldn't answer without explaining the card, the test, the impossible situation Victoria Blackwood had created. So he just clapped Owen on the shoulder and walked out, leaving his friend confused and worried in aisle 3. Marcus spent the afternoon walking Chicago's South Loop, thinking about Diane Harper in Unit 12, and her 2 kids shivering through November nights because landlords didn't care and the city moved too slow. And people like Victoria Blackwood tracked credit card purchases instead of fixing actual problems. By the time he reached Halsted Street at 4:30, he'd made a decision that would either prove he was a fool or demonstrate something Victoria's test couldn't measure. Ethan was doing homework when Marcus got home. The boy looked up, coughing once, face still flushed. "Did you eat?" Ethan nodded toward an empty bowl. "Cereal." Marcus pulled out his phone and called the number on the card Victoria had left. She answered on the first ring. "Mr. Reed, I need you to come to my building. Now, there's something you need to see." Silence then. "Give me the address." Marcus rattled it off and hung up before she could ask questions. He walked down to the lobby and waited, watching through the cracked glass door as a black Mercedes pulled up 20 minutes later. Victoria emerged, Tom following at a respectful distance. Both of them studying the building like archaeologists examining ruins. Marcus held the door. "3rd floor, Unit 12. Victoria's eyebrows rose fractionally, but she climbed the stairs without comment. Marcus led them to Diane Harper's door and knocked. Diane answered, 2 kids visible behind her legs, all 3 wearing winter coats indoors. "Marcus is everything." Diane's eyes went wide, seeing Victoria's expensive clothes, Tom's professional bearing. Marcus spoke quickly before courage could fail. "Diane, this is Victoria Blackwood. She's someone who helps people. Your heat's been out 3 weeks. Your landlord won't fix it. She can fix it." Diane's face cycled through confusion, hope, suspicion. "I don't take charity." The words mirrored Marcus's own from 2 days ago. He met her eyes, understanding exactly what the admission cost. "It's not charity. It's neighbors helping neighbors, and she has the resources we don't." Victoria studied the apartment over Diane's shoulder. The coats worn indoors, the blankets piled on furniture. The space heater plugged into an outlet that probably couldn't handle the load safely. Her expression remained neutral, but something in her eyes shifted. "May I come in?" Diane stepped aside. Victoria entered, Tom trailing, and for 3 minutes nobody spoke while she assessed the situation. The kids, a girl, maybe 5, a boy, maybe 3, watched from the couch, with enormous eyes clutching each other beneath shared blankets. Victoria turned to Diane. When did the furnace stop working? 3 weeks ago. I called the landlord 11 times. He says it's too expensive to fix. How much is rent? $900 a month. Victoria pulled out her phone, typing rapidly. I'm calling a heating contractor I know. They'll be here within 2 hours. I'll pay for the furnace repair and 3 months of your rent. No strings. Diane's face crumpled. I can't. You can. Victoria's voice carried no warmth, but it held conviction. Your children need heat. That's not negotiable. She turned to Marcus. Was this what you wanted to show me? Marcus nodded. You wanted to know what I'd do with your resources. Here's my answer. I'd help people who need it more than I do. Victoria's expression remained unreadable, but her fingers tightened on her phone. She made 3 calls, heating contractor landlord to threaten legal action and some kind of property management company Marcus didn't catch. Within minutes, things were in motion. Diane cried silently, kids still clutching blankets, while Tom took notes and Victoria directed operations with the efficient ruthlessness of someone used to bending the world to her will. They left 20 minutes later, contractors already en route. Victoria stopped on the second-floor landing, blocking Marcus's path. Why did you do that? Marcus met her eyes. Because I know what it's like to be cold and desperate and have people walk past like you're invisible. Diane's been asking for help for 3 weeks. 3 weeks her kids have been freezing. I can't fix that, but you can. So I made you see it. By using your test time to solve someone else's problems. That's what you wanted to know, isn't it? What kind of person I am, this is it. I'm the kind who'd rather help someone else than help myself, because that's what Lily taught me before she died. Marcus's voice roughened. My wife chose death to save money for our son. She looked at the equation, her life versus Ethan's future, and decided his future mattered more. That's the standard I'm trying to meet. That's what real sacrifice looks like. Not buying things I need instead of things I want. Actually giving up something that costs me to help someone who needs it more. Victoria said nothing for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice carried less ice. Your wife made an impossible choice. She made the only choice she could live with, or die with, I guess. Marcus turned to climb the stairs. I've got 6 hours left on your test. I'm going to pick up my son from school, make dinner, and put him to bed. If that's not good enough for whatever you're trying to prove, I don't know what to tell you. Victoria watched him go, something unreadable crossing her features. Tom cleared his throat delicately. Ma'am, should we follow him? I need to see how this ends. They tracked Marcus to Lincoln Elementary, watched him collect Ethan, followed them to a small bookstore on Taylor Street. Victoria stayed in the car while Marcus and Ethan browsed, emerging 15 minutes later with a small bag. Her phone buzzed. $50. 5 used books, picture books, and early readers' titles about science and electricity and how the world worked. Marcus and Ethan stopped at a small park despite the cold. They sat on a bench and Marcus read aloud while Ethan leaned against his father's shoulder. New coat keeping him warm enough to enjoy the fading afternoon. Victoria watched through the Mercedes's tinted windows, Graham's ghost sitting heavy in her chest. Her brother had loved books, spent his last paychecks on textbooks about metallurgy and welding techniques, studying at night after 12-hour shifts, because he believed knowledge was the only inheritance worth passing down. Victoria had those books now stored in her penthouse unread. She'd built an empire but never opened the volumes Graham died trying to master. At 5:30, Marcus and Ethan walked home. Victoria followed to the building's entrance, then sat in the car tracking purchases on her phone. Nothing new came through. The test had 3 hours remaining, and Marcus Reed had spent $591,407 on his son's immediate needs, $50 on books, $134 on helping a neighbor in crisis. Tom shifted in the driver's seat. "Ma'am, it's getting late. Should we return to the residence?" Victoria didn't answer. She was calculating probabilities, testing her hypothesis against data that didn't fit the models. 14 previous subjects had all revealed selfishness within hours. Marcus Reed had revealed something else, something that either proved he was uniquely noble or uniquely manipulative, and Victoria needed to know which before the test ended, and she lost her chance to understand. At 7 p.m., Marcus's phone rang. Victoria. He almost didn't answer, but Ethan was reading in the bedroom and the chicken was roasting, and he had nothing left to lose by talking to the woman who'd turned his life into a social experiment. "Mr. Reed, I need to speak with you. In person. Can you meet me downstairs?" Marcus looked at Ethan through the bedroom doorway. "My son is here. I'm not leaving him alone." "Then I'll come up." Marcus hung up and waited. 3 minutes later, a knock echoed through the thin door. He opened it to find Victoria standing in the hallway, Tom conspicuously absent, her expression less guarded than he'd yet seen her. "May I come in?" Marcus stepped aside. Victoria entered, and he watched her take in the apartment, the cracked walls, the space heater, the furniture held together with duct tape and determination. She said nothing about the poverty on display, just stood near the kitchen counter, hands folded. "I owe you an apology." Marcus blinked, surprised. "For what?" "For treating you like a science experiment. For reducing your struggles to data points in my grief." Victoria's voice carried something new, vulnerability, carefully controlled but present. "I lost my brother 10 years ago. He died because he couldn't afford treatment, and I've spent the last decade trying to understand if that was his fault or the system's fault. If poor people stay poor because they're irresponsible, or because poverty itself is a trap impossible to escape through individual virtue." Marcus leaned against the counter, studying this woman who'd invaded his life with her guilt and her money. "And what's your conclusion?" "I don't know yet. 14 test subjects spent my money on themselves. You spent it on your son and a stranger's heating bill. Either you're the exception that proves the rule, or my entire framework is wrong. Maybe your framework doesn't account for love." Marcus's voice softened despite himself. "Maybe you're measuring the wrong variables. It's not about whether someone's responsible or irresponsible. It's about what they're willing to sacrifice and why. Your brother died to preserve your future. My wife died to preserve our sons. That's not irresponsibility. That's prioritizing something bigger than yourself." Victoria's mask slipped further, revealing the grief beneath. "Graham refused my money. Said he wouldn't let me throw away my future for his past. I hated him for that. Still do sometimes. He chose death over letting me help. He chose your life over his. Same as Lily chose Ethan's over hers. That's not refusing help, that's accepting that some things matter more than survival." Marcus hesitated then. "You want to know if your brother deserved to die? Poor, wrong question. Nobody deserves death by poverty. But people like Graham, like Lily, they make choices that transcend deserving. They look at impossible equations and solve for love instead of self-preservation. That's not failure. That's the only kind of success that actually matters." Victoria's eyes glistened, and she turned toward the window to hide it. "I have 3 hours left on the test. What will you do with them?" Marcus pulled the black card from his pocket. "I'm going to return this now. I don't need 3 more hours. I've spent enough of your money. You've spent $591. Some people would have spent $50,000 by now. Then they're different than me. Or maybe they're smarter. Maybe I'm a fool for not maximizing what you offered." Marcus extended the card. "Either way, the test is over. Thank you for the coat, the medicine, the groceries. Thank you for helping Diane Harper, but I'm done proving anything to you or myself or anyone else. This isn't who I am, taking handouts from rich people who need their grief validated. Victoria took the card slowly as if it might burn her. What happens Friday? Your rent is due. You don't have it. I'll figure something out. I always do. That's not a plan. Marcus's laugh was bitter. No, but it's all I've got. Plans are for people with stable income and savings. I live crisis to crisis, and Friday will be another crisis I'll somehow survive because giving up isn't an option when you have a kid depending on you. Victoria pocketed the card, then did something Marcus didn't expect. She smiled. Small, sad, but genuine. My brother would have liked you. You're as stubborn as he was. Stubbornness is poverty's survival mechanism. Or pride's, depending how you look at it. Victoria moved toward the door, paused with her hand on the knob. I'm starting a foundation. Medical debt relief for families who fall through the system's cracks. I'd like to name it after your wife if you'd allow it. The Lily Reed Foundation. Marcus's throat tightened. Why? Because she made a choice that revealed something true about human nature, that love is stronger than self-preservation, that deserves to be honored, not forgotten. Victoria's voice wavered slightly, and because maybe if I can help other families avoid that impossible choice, Graham's death won't have been completely meaningless. Marcus nodded, unable to speak past the emotion clogging his airways. Victoria opened the door, stepped into the hallway, then turned back one final time. The job offer stands. Building maintenance supervisor for my properties. $65,000 a year. Full benefits. I meant what I said. I want employees who understand what real work ethic looks like. You've proven that more than anyone I've ever met. She left before Marcus could respond, and he stood in his empty apartment listening to her footsteps fade down the stairs. Through the bedroom door, Ethan called out, Dad, who was that? Marcus walked to the bedroom, sat on the edge of the mattress, pulled his son close. Someone trying to understand whether good people exist. I think she found her answer. Are we good people? Marcus kissed Ethan's head. We're trying to be buddy. That's all anyone can do. That night, after Ethan fell asleep in his new coat, Marcus sat at the kitchen table with $547 still needed for rent. No job in a winter that promised nothing but more struggle. But he also had a son who was warm and fed and medicated. A neighbor whose heat would work by morning. And maybe, just maybe, a job offer from a woman who'd started the week thinking poverty revealed character flaws and ended it. Understanding that character revealed itself through impossible choices made with love instead of fear. Marcus didn't know if he'd take Victoria Blackwood's job offer. Pride whispered that accepting felt too much like charity, too much like proving his worth through someone else's validation. But another voice, the one that sounded like Lily when she was healthy and fierce, and certain about what mattered, whispered that providing for Ethan meant accepting help when it came from respect rather than pity. Tomorrow he'd decide. Tonight he'd just sit in the quiet apartment listening to his son breathe, grateful for the coat that would keep him warm and the books that would teach him to think, and the knowledge that at least one person in Chicago understood that poverty wasn't a moral failure but a circumstantial trap that good people fought against every single day. Victoria sat in her penthouse staring at the black card she'd just reclaimed. $591. In 43 hours, Marcus Reed had spent less than what she paid for dinner at high-end restaurants, and every cent had gone to people other than himself. The 14 previous test subjects had failed because they'd revealed ordinary human selfishness. Marcus Reed had passed by revealing something rarer, the willingness to sacrifice self-interest for those he loved. She opened her laptop and began drafting foundation documents. The Lily Reed Foundation for Medical Debt Relief. $10 million initial funding. Board members to be determined, but she already knew who she wanted as co-director. A man who understood poverty from inside it, who could identify families needing help without making them prove their worthiness through some degrading means test. Tom knocked softly. "Ma'am, you should rest. It's nearly midnight." Victoria didn't look up from the screen. "I need to finish this first. You've been working since dawn. Whatever it is can wait." "No." Victoria's voice carried unusual intensity. "It's already waited 10 years. My brother died because I couldn't help him in time. Marcus Reed's wife died for the same reason. How many others have died or will die because people like me hoard wealth while people like them make impossible choices? This can't wait another day." Tom withdrew silently, and Victoria continued typing, fingers flying across the keyboard, building the structure that would turn her guilt into action, her test into purpose. Marcus Reed had given her the answer she'd been seeking. Not about whether poor people deserved poverty, but about whether wealth created obligation. It did. Wealth was power, and power wielded selfishly was just another form of poverty. The poverty of meaning, of connection, of understanding that survival without purpose was just slower death. Marcus Reed survived for his son. Graham had tried to survive for Victoria's future. Lily had chosen death for Ethan's chance at life. And Victoria had spent 10 years surviving while avoiding the question of what she was surviving for. Now she knew. The foundation would be her answer, imperfect, insufficient, but real. A way to transform the wealth she'd built from Graham's sacrifice into something that honored his memory instead of just memorializing his absence. She worked through the night, and when dawn broke over Lake Michigan, the foundation's charter was complete. Victoria stood at her window watching the city wake, and for the first time in 10 years, felt something other than the hollow ache of grief. It wasn't peace. Peace would take longer, might never arrive. But it was purpose, and purpose was enough to keep moving forward. Friday morning arrived with Marcus staring at the ceiling, calculating impossible math for the 1,000th time. Rent due in 6 hours, $437 in his account after pawning his spare multimeter and an old laptop that barely worked. Still short by $413. The landlord, a man named Kowalski who'd never shown mercy before, wasn't going to start now. Ethan stirred beside him, coughing wetly in sleep. The fever had returned during the night despite the medicine, and Marcus's trained hand on the boy's forehead confirmed what Dredd already knew: this was getting worse, not better. The cough syrup was gone, the ibuprofen down to a single dose, and Marcus had exactly $0 he could spend on medicine, without choosing between medication and eviction. He rose quietly, made oatmeal with the last of the canister, divided it between 2 bowls. Ethan shuffled into the kitchen, still wearing the blue coat face, flushed eyes glassy. "Happy birthday, buddy." Ethan managed a weak smile. "I'm 8 now." "You are, big man." Marcus set the bowl in front of his son, watched him pick at it without enthusiasm. "Not hungry. My throat hurts." Marcus felt his chest constrict. "Strep pneumonia. Something requiring a doctor they couldn't afford and treatment beyond over-the-counter medicine." He reached across the table, squeezed Ethan's small hand. "We'll figure it out. I promise." The words felt hollow. Marcus had been promising to figure things out for 3 years, and they kept sliding backward despite his best efforts. Lily's voice echoed in memory. "You're a good father, Marcus. Don't let the world convince you otherwise." But Lily was dead, and the world was convincing him daily that good fathers kept their children from getting sicker because they couldn't afford basic health care. At 9:30, someone knocked. Marcus answered to find a courier holding a large envelope with Victoria Blackwood's return address embossed in elegant script. He signed, closed the door, and stared at the package like it might contain an explosive device. Inside, a check for $850 with rent written in the memo line. A formal employment contract, building maintenance supervisor, Blackwood Property Management. Annual salary $65,000, benefits effective immediately, start date December 1st, and a 3-page prospectus for the Lily Reed Foundation with Victoria's personal note paperclip to the front. Mr. Reed. This isn't charity. The job offer is legitimate pending your acceptance. The foundation is real and I'd like you to serve as co-director. Your expertise identifying families in need is exactly what this organization requires. The rent check is an advance on your first paycheck if you choose to accept. If not, consider it a loan to be repaid when circumstances allow. Your choice. VB. Marcus sat at the kitchen table, hands shaking, reading the contract 3 times to confirm it was real. $65,000 annually. Health insurance, dental, vision, the works starting January 1st. Paid time off. Retirement matching. Everything he'd lost when he quit ComEd. Everything he'd spent 3 years trying to rebuild through day labor and desperation. Ethan appeared in the doorway, coat wrapped tight, eyes questioning. "Dad, what's wrong?" Marcus looked at his son, thought about pride and sacrifice and Lily choosing death over debt. Then he thought about the alternative, teaching Ethan that accepting help from someone who respected your struggle wasn't weakness but wisdom. That partnership was different than charity. That sometimes the strongest thing you could do was let someone help you climb instead of drowning, while insisting you could swim alone. He pulled out his phone and called Victoria. She answered immediately. "Mr. Reed." "The rent check, I can't accept it." Marcus forced the words past the part of him screaming to take it. "But the job, I'll take the job, on one condition." Silence then. "Which is, you let me pay you back the $591 from the test, from my first few paychecks, not a gift, a loan I repay with labor." Victoria's voice carried something that might have been amusement. "You spent that money on your son and a neighbor. Most people would call that a gift. Most people don't live where I do. Where I'm from, debts get repaid, even kindness debts." Marcus's grip tightened on the phone. "I need to know this job is real, not charity dressed up as employment. That I'm working for you, not accepting handouts from you." "The job is real, Mr. Reed. I need someone who understands maintenance systems and can identify property issues before they become crises. Your military and electrical background makes you overqualified, if anything. As for the $591 fine, I'll deduct $50 from your first 12 paychecks. Does that satisfy your pride?" Marcus exhaled tension he hadn't realized he was carrying. "Yes." "Then we have an agreement. Can you start Monday?" "I can start today if you need me." "Monday is fine. Spend the weekend with your son. It's his birthday, correct?" Marcus glanced at Ethan, who'd wandered back to the bedroom. "How did you—" "The background check mentioned it. He's 8 today." Victoria paused, and when she spoke again, her voice carried less ice. "I'm at the office until 6. If you'd like, I could stop by this evening. Bring something appropriate for a birthday celebration." Marcus's first instinct was to refuse. But Ethan had never had a real birthday party. Never had someone besides Marcus acknowledge the day he came into the world mattered. And Victoria Blackwood, for all her wealth and coldness and complicated grief, had treated Marcus with more dignity in 4 days than most people managed in years. "Ethan would like that. Thank you." 6:30. She disconnected before Marcus could change his mind. Marcus spent the afternoon trying to clean the apartment, which mostly involved moving clutter from visible surfaces to hidden corners and scrubbing the bathroom until his hands cramped. Ethan napped fitfully, coughing in sleep, and Marcus checked on him every 20 minutes with growing unease. The fever refused to break despite medicine. The cough sounded deeper, wetter, like something was settling in places lungs shouldn't let things settle. At 5, Marcus woke Ethan and they shared leftover chicken and rice. The boy ate 3 bites, declared himself full, and returned to bed without being asked. Marcus sat beside him, feeling helpless in the way only parents of sick children understand. Wanting to absorb the illness, take the pain, trade his health for his son's with desperate urgency that had nowhere productive to channel itself. Victoria arrived at 6:30 precisely, Tom carrying a white bakery box and a wrapped present. She'd changed from her usual armor-like business attire into dark jeans and a cashmere sweater that probably cost more than Marcus's monthly rent, but looked almost normal, almost approachable. "Mr. Reed." "Marcus is fine." He held the door wider. "Come in." Victoria entered and Tom set the packages on the kitchen counter before retreating to wait in the car. She studied the apartment with less clinical assessment than her first visit, seeing it as a home rather than a case study in poverty. Her eyes lingered on the space heater, the duct-taped furniture, the stains Marcus couldn't scrub away despite his best efforts. "Where's Ethan?" "Sleeping. He's been sick all day, fever won't break." Concern crossed Victoria's features. Should he see a doctor? Should and can afford are different questions. Marcus moved to the bedroom door, tapped softly. "Ethan, someone's here to see you." The boy emerged slowly, still wearing the coat indoors, face flushed and eyes unfocused. He blinked at Victoria, confusion evident. "Ethan, this is Victoria, a friend of mine. She brought you a birthday present." Victoria knelt, bringing herself to eye level with the child, a gesture Marcus didn't expect from someone who moved through the world at commanding height. "Happy birthday, Ethan. Your father tells me you're interested in how things work." Ethan nodded, shy suddenly. "I brought you something." Victoria retrieved the wrapped package, handed it over. "It's a science kit. Experiments with electricity, magnetism, simple machines. Your father can help you with it." Ethan tore into the wrapping with the desperate enthusiasm of a child who'd never received a real present. Inside was a legitimate science kit, not the cheap dollar store version, but quality educational material designed to teach actual principles. His face lit up with wonder that momentarily pushed through fever-induced fog. "Dad, look, it has circuits and magnets and—" A coughing fit interrupted him, deep and rattling. Marcus was at his side immediately, hand on his back, counting the coughs, noting how they originated in the chest rather than throat. Ethan's breath wheezed slightly when he inhaled. Marcus met Victoria's eyes over his son's head, and she saw the fear he was trying to hide. Victoria opened the bakery box, revealing a simple cake with blue frosting and "Happy Birthday, Ethan" written in careful script. "Why don't we have cake first, then you can explore the kit?" They sat at the cramped table, 3 people forming an unlikely constellation around dessert that cost more than Marcus usually spent on groceries. Ethan managed 2 bites before pushing his plate away, apologetic. "I'm sorry. My stomach feels bad." Marcus touched his forehead again. "Hotter than an hour ago." "It's okay, buddy. Why don't you lie down?" Ethan took the science kit to bed, studying it with fading focus until his eyes drifted shut. Marcus tucked the blanket around him, lingering to ensure the breathing remained steady, then returned to the kitchen where Victoria was awkwardly covering the cake. "He needs a doctor." Her voice carried certainty, not suggestion. "I know, but the clinic won't see him until Monday and I can't afford the ER." "I'll pay." Marcus's jaw tightened. "We just established I'm working for you, not accepting handouts." "This isn't a handout. This is a child who's seriously ill, requiring immediate care." Victoria's ice melted slightly, revealing genuine concern underneath. My brother died because of pride like yours. Because he refused help until it was too late. Don't make that mistake with your son." The words landed like physical blows. Marcus gripped the counter-edge, knuckles white, fighting the combination of fury and gratitude that made his chest feel too small for his lungs. Victoria was right. Pride was a luxury Ethan couldn't afford, but accepting felt like surrendering something fundamental about who Marcus was, about the man he'd promised Lily he'd remain. "If I take your help, how do I repay it?" "You don't. You pay it forward through the foundation. Help other families avoid these impossible choices." Victoria pulled out her phone. "I'm calling my personal physician. He makes house calls for situations like this." Marcus wanted to argue, wanted to insist he could handle this himself, find a way through sheer determination and resourcefulness. But Ethan coughed in the other room, and the sound contained all the justification Marcus needed to swallow his pride and nod acceptance. Dr. Richard Carlyle arrived 45 minutes later, medical bag in hand. Expression professionally neutral as he took in the apartment's condition. He examined Ethan thoroughly. Temperature, respiration, listened to lungs with a stethoscope, asked questions about symptom progression. His face grew grave as the examination continued. "Pneumonia. Early stage but developing fast. He needs to be admitted to the hospital tonight. IV antibiotics, supplemental oxygen monitoring." Marcus felt the floor drop away. "Hospital means keeping him alive, Mr. Reed." Carlyle's voice held no judgment, only medical necessity. "Pneumonia in a 7-year-old with possible underlying malnutrition can turn critical very fast. We can't wait until Monday." Victoria stepped forward. "Which hospital?" "Northwestern Memorial has the best pediatric unit. I'll call ahead, make sure they're expecting him." Marcus found himself in the ambulance 40 minutes later, holding Ethan's hand, while paramedics administered oxygen and started an IV. The boy was barely conscious, fever spiking to 103.8 despite medication. Marcus rode beside him, whispering reassurances he didn't believe, promises he didn't know if he could keep. Northwestern Memorial's pediatric emergency entrance blazed with fluorescent urgency. Doctors and nurses converged, whisking Ethan away while someone in scrubs shoved admission paperwork at Marcus. "Insurance none. Payment method none. Estimated ability to pay none." The registrar's expression shifted from professional to pitying. "Sir, treatment for pneumonia, even with quick discharge, typically runs $15,000 to $20,000. Without insurance." "I'll handle it." Victoria's voice cut through Marcus's rising panic. She'd followed in the Mercedes, now stood beside him, radiating the authority of someone accustomed to bending institutions through sheer force of wealth. "All charges go to me. Victoria Blackwood. Here's my card." The registrar blinked at the black Amex. "Ms. Blackwood, hospital policy requires, your policy can send the bill to Blackwood Capital Management. This child needs treatment now, not a financial counseling session." Victoria's eyes held steel. "Unless you'd prefer I call your hospital administrator at home to discuss why your staff prioritized billing over a critically ill 7-year-old. The registrar paled. I'll process this right away." Marcus stared at Victoria, emotions too complex to name roiling through him. Gratitude, shame, anger, relief, all competing for dominance while his son fought for breath 3 rooms away. Victoria met his eyes and something passed between them. Understanding, maybe. Recognition that some moments transcended pride and demanded simple humanity. "Why are you doing this?" Victoria's mask cracked wider. "Because when Graham was dying, I had $12,000 and no way to help him. I watched him deteriorate because I didn't have enough money and he wouldn't let me try. I've spent 10 years building wealth so I'd never feel that helpless again." but money is meaningless if I can't use it when it actually matters. Her voice wavered slightly. This is me being there for Graham. Too late for him, but not too late for your son. Marcus's throat closed around words that wouldn't form. Before he could force them out, a doctor emerged, young female, exhausted but competent looking. Mr. Reed, I'm Dr. Sarah Kim. Your son has bacterial pneumonia, moderate severity. We've started aggressive IV antibiotics and oxygen support. He's stable for now, but the next 24 hours are critical. We'll need to monitor closely. Can I see him? Once we get him settled in PICU, 15 minutes. Dr. Kim glanced at Victoria. Ms. Blackwood, your physician indicated you're covering expenses. We appreciate that. It allows us to focus on treatment rather than complications. Victoria nodded. Whatever he needs, no cost limits. Dr. Kim retreated and Marcus sank into a waiting room chair, face in hands, shoulders shaking with the violent emotions he'd been suppressing for hours. Days, years, since Lily died and left him alone to be both mother and father to a boy he loved more than breathing but couldn't seem to keep safe no matter how hard he fought. Victoria sat beside him, maintaining careful distance, letting him fracture without offering empty comfort. When Marcus finally raised his head, eyes red but dry, she spoke quietly. I need to tell you something about Graham. Something I've never told anyone. Marcus looked at her, waiting. He didn't just refuse my money. He took out a life insurance policy 6 months before he died. $50,000. Made me the beneficiary without telling me. When he died, the insurance company denied the claim, said he had a pre-existing condition he didn't disclose on the application. I hired a lawyer, spent $8,000 fighting it. Lost. Victoria's voice hardened with remembered fury. That $8,000 was what remained of my education fund. I used it trying to get money Graham wanted me to have, and when I lost, I had nothing left except debt and rage. Marcus absorbed this understanding suddenly. That's why you test people. You're trying to understand if Graham made bad choices or if the system failed him. I know which it is now. The system failed him. Failed your wife. Fails families every single day, and we act like it's individual failure instead of structural cruelty. Victoria's hands clenched in her lap. I can't bring Graham back. Can't undo the years I spent being angry at him for dying. But I can make sure other families have options he didn't. Options Lily didn't. That's what the foundation is for. And that's why you want me involved, because I know what it's like from inside the trap. You know which families are drowning versus which are just treading water. You know how to identify need without making people prove their worthiness through degrading means tests. You're exactly who should run this, someone who understands that poverty isn't moral failure but circumstantial catastrophe. Marcus leaned back, exhausted and overwhelmed. If Ethan doesn't, if something happens, he'll be fine. The doctors here are excellent. Victoria's certainty carried the force of someone used to willing reality into compliance with her expectations. You don't know that. No. But I believe it, and sometimes belief is what carries you through the hours when knowledge fails. They sat in silence. Two people whose lives had collided through shared loss, waiting for doctors to determine whether Marcus's son would be the latest casualty of a system that measured human value in dollars and denied care to those who couldn't pay. Ethan emerged from crisis at 4 a.m. The antibiotics worked with merciful speed, fever breaking around midnight, breathing easing by 2. Dr. Kim found Marcus and Victoria in the family waiting area. Marcus pacing Victoria, stationary but alert, and delivered the news with a smile that transformed her exhausted features. He's stable. Fever's down to 99.3. Oxygen saturation is 96%. We'll keep him another 48 hours for monitoring, but barring complications, he should make full recovery. Marcus's legs buckled. Victoria caught his elbow, steadying him, her grip surprisingly strong. Can I see him? He's sleeping, but yes, follow me. Ethan looked impossibly small in the hospital bed, dwarfed by machines and monitors. The blue coat lay folded on a chair, and someone had dressed him in a pediatric gown, patterned with cartoon dinosaurs. An IV snaked into his left hand, taped carefully. The oxygen cannula beneath his nose fogged rhythmically with each breath. Marcus stood beside the bed, one hand resting on Ethan's forehead, cool now, blessedly cool, and felt something break loose in his chest. The fear he'd been carrying for days, the certainty that he was failing as a father, the weight of trying to honor Lily's sacrifice while watching their son slip away from malnutrition and inadequate care, all of it cracked open, releasing pressure that had nowhere left to go except out through silent tears he didn't try to hide. Victoria stood at the doorway, giving him space, watching this man she'd reduced to a test subject reveal himself as something far more complex. A father terrified of failing his son, a widower trying to honor his dead wife, a worker ground down by systems designed to break people exactly like him. She'd started this week thinking she could measure worthiness through spending patterns. She ended it understanding that some truths couldn't be quantified, only witnessed. 2 days later, Marcus brought Ethan home with prescriptions covered by Victoria's physician and follow-up appointments scheduled with a pediatrician who accepted pro bono cases. The apartment felt different, smaller somehow, despite nothing physical changing. Or maybe Marcus felt different, carrying the knowledge that his son had nearly died while he'd been too proud to accept help until Victoria forced it on him. Ethan recovered quickly, bouncing back with the resilience of children who don't yet understand how close they came to something irreversible. He spent hours with the science kit conducting electricity experiments with Marcus's supervision, asking questions that revealed a sharp mind hungry for understanding. Monday morning, Marcus reported to Blackwood Property Management's headquarters, a converted warehouse in West Loop that had been transformed into sleek office space while maintaining industrial bones. Victoria met him in the lobby, professional mask fully restored, and conducted a tour that revealed the scope of his new responsibilities. 23 residential properties across Chicago, 12 commercial buildings, maintenance schedules, contractor coordination, emergency response protocols, a small staff, 2 office workers, rotating maintenance crew of 15, salary budget of $800,000 annually, and complete authority to identify and address issues before they escalated. The goal isn't maximizing profit. Victoria's voice echoed in the empty conference room where she'd spread blueprints and maintenance logs. The goal is maintaining quality housing that people can actually afford. No one gets evicted for late rent without exhausting alternatives first. No one loses heat in winter because repairs are too expensive. You understand what I'm trying to build here. Marcus studied the document, seeing between the lines. You're trying to run properties the way you wish someone had run your brother's building. Precisely. Can you do it? Marcus met her eyes, seeing the challenge and the trust equally balanced. Yes. Good. You start today. Office is yours. She gestured toward a corner space with windows overlooking the Chicago River. I had them set it up this morning. If you need anything, equipment, staff, resources, requisition it. The foundation launches officially in January, but I'd like you involved in planning now. Can you commit to that? When do you sleep? Victoria's smile held no warmth, only acknowledgement of a truth she'd lived with for years. I don't. Not well. Too much to build, too many years lost to grief I'm trying to transmute into purpose. Graham would be proud of you. The words clearly hit harder than Victoria expected. Her composure flickered, revealing the vulnerability beneath. I hope so. I need to believe his death meant something beyond just teaching me how cruel the world can be. It meant showing you what matters. Some people live entire lives without learning that. Graham gave you the lesson early, even if it cost him everything. Victoria turned away, ostensibly studying blueprints, but actually hiding the emotion Marcus's words had surfaced. Get to work, Mr. Reed. I expect daily progress reports. Marcus, if we're doing this, we're doing it as equals, not employer and employee. Victoria paused, considering, then nodded. Marcus, it is, but I'm still your boss, so don't test boundaries too much. Wouldn't dream of it. The weeks blurred into structured routine. Marcus dove into building maintenance with the focus of someone who'd found purpose beyond mere survival. He identified heating issues at 3 properties before winter fully set in negotiated contracts with suppliers that saved 30% on materials, and hired 2 additional crew members from the VA hospital's job placement program, veterans who understood hard work and appreciated second chances. Ethan thrived. The stability of Marcus's employment, the regular paychecks, the health insurance that covered not just emergencies but preventative care, all of it created breathing room they'd never known. Marcus enrolled Ethan in an after-school program that provided homework help and dinner, eliminating the desperate scramble to pick him up at 3 while maintaining work responsibilities. December bled into January. The Lily Reed Foundation launched with a press conference Victoria choreographed with ruthless efficiency. $10 million initial funding, partnership with 5 major hospital systems, automatic debt forgiveness for families earning below 200% of poverty line facing medical debt from catastrophic illness. No applications, no means testing, no requirements except need. Marcus stood at the podium in an actual suit Victoria had insisted he acquire, looking out at reporters and medical professionals and philanthropists who'd gathered in the foundation's new office space. His hands shook slightly, holding the prepared remarks, but his voice stayed steady. My wife, Lily Reed, died 3 years ago from breast cancer, not because cancer is always fatal, but because treatment cost more than we could afford, and she chose our son's future over her own survival. She made an impossible choice that no one should ever have to make. This foundation exists so other families don't face that choice, so love doesn't have to compete with survival, so parents can get treatment without bankrupting their children's future. He faltered slightly, emotion cracking his voice. Lily believed that taking care of people was more important than taking care of yourself, that love meant sacrifice, but sacrifice shouldn't mean death. I hope this foundation honors that belief. I hope we can help families avoid the equation that took her from us. Applause rolled through the room and Marcus stepped back, throat tight. Victoria took the podium next, delivering statistics and program details with clinical precision. But her eyes kept returning to Marcus, acknowledgement that his words carried weight her money couldn't purchase. After the event, as photographers captured images and donors competed for Victoria's attention, Marcus slipped outside to breathe cold January air. Chicago winter bit through his suit jacket, but the discomfort felt clarifying. Real. A reminder that he existed in space and time, not just grief and memory. Footsteps crunched on the salted pavement. Victoria joined him, still wearing her armor of professional competence, but carrying it differently now. Less shield, more habit. You did well in there. Marcus shrugged. Told the truth. That's all anyone can do. The truth is what people remember. Not the statistics, not the program details. Your truth about Lily, that's what they'll carry away. Victoria stared at the city stretching beyond the foundation's modest building. I've been thinking about something you said, about Graham being proud of me. I don't know if that's true, but I know Lily would be proud of you, of how you've kept fighting for Ethan despite everything. Fighting is all I know. Lily taught me that. You keep fighting until you can't anymore, then you find a way to keep fighting anyway. That's not sustainable. Victoria's voice softened. You'll burn out. Already burned out. I'm running on fumes and stubbornness. Marcus turned to face her, seeing past the Ice Queen reputation to the woman underneath, damaged and determined, wealthy, but wounded, powerful, yet still searching for the same answers he was. We both are. Difference is you've got resources to mask it. I've just got the stubbornness. Maybe that's enough. Maybe stubbornness is how we change things, refusing to accept the world as it is until it becomes what it should be. Pretty philosophy from someone who can afford to be philosophical. Victoria's laugh was unexpected, genuine. Fair point, but you're wrong about me affording it. Money can't buy peace, Marcus. Can't buy absolution for surviving when others didn't. I'm as broke as you in the ways that actually matter. They stood in compatible silence, two people from different worlds who'd found unexpected solidarity and shared loss. Eventually, Victoria's assistant emerged to drag her back to donor conversations, and Marcus returned to his office to review maintenance schedules and contractor bids. But something had shifted between them, recognition that partnership meant more than professional collaboration. It meant acknowledging that survival required connection, that fighting alone was just slower surrender. 6 months later, Marcus stood in the living room of his new apartment, watching Ethan arrange books on shelves Marcus had built from salvaged wood. The space wasn't luxury, 2 bedrooms in a building Victoria's company had recently renovated, rent-controlled at $900 monthly. But it was clean, warm, and stable in ways their previous place never managed. Ethan's room had a real bed, a desk for homework, windows without cracks. The kitchen had appliances that worked. The bathroom had water pressure. Basic dignity, but dignity nonetheless. Marcus still paid rent, still worked 60-hour weeks, still struggled with the gap between paycheck and expenses. But the gap was manageable now, survivable. Victoria arrived at 7 with Chinese takeout and updates on foundation metrics. They'd helped 43 families in 6 months, wiping out $1.3 million in medical debt. Hospital partnerships were expanding. Other cities were requesting information about replicating the model. What had started as Victoria's attempt to answer a decade-old question about her brother was becoming something with momentum beyond grief. They ate from cardboard containers sitting on Marcus's second-hand couch, discussing case files and property maintenance issues with the easy rhythm of people who'd learned to work together effectively. Ethan joined them after finishing homework, excited about an upcoming science fair where he'd be demonstrating simple circuits using principles from the kit Victoria had given him. "What's your project called?" Victoria asked, genuinely interested. "How electricity empowers communities." Ethan's enthusiasm made him talk faster. "I'm showing how electrical systems power everything. Lights, heat, communication. Dad helped me understand how it works. He said electricity is like possibility. It exists everywhere, but you need the right connections to make it useful." Victoria met Marcus's eyes over Ethan's head, something unspoken passing between them. "Your father is a wise man. The wisest." Ethan's loyalty was absolute, unquestioning, in the way only children's love can be. "He says we're building something important together, that helping people is the most important work anyone can do. He's right about that." Victoria set down her container, attention fully on the boy. "Your mother would be proud of what you're becoming, Ethan, of how smart and curious and kind you are." Ethan's face grew solemn. "Dad says Mom died so I could live better, that she loved me enough to—" His voice cracked, 8-year-old composure fracturing. "I miss her, even though I don't remember her much. Is that okay?" Marcus pulled his son close, blinking hard against the emotion that never fully receded, just lurked beneath everyday functioning. "That's more than okay, buddy. Missing people means they mattered. Means the love doesn't stop even when they're gone." Victoria excused herself to the bathroom and Marcus heard the tap run longer than washing hands required. When she returned, her eyes held telltale redness, but she said nothing about it. Just helped clear the takeout containers, asked Ethan more questions about his project, and generally acted like a person who'd learned to be comfortable in spaces that used to feel alien. Later, after Ethan went to bed clutching a book about electrical engineering, Victoria and Marcus stood at the apartment's small balcony looking out at Chicago's night sprawl. Streetlights marked invisible grid patterns, cars tracing routes through the urban maze, windows glowing with the contained lives of thousands. "I've been thinking about something." Victoria's voice barely carried above the ambient city noise. "The foundation needs to expand beyond medical debt, housing stability, job training, education access, all the things that keep people trapped in poverty cycles. I want to build something comprehensive, something that actually addresses root causes. That's ambitious, also expensive. I have money. What I need is someone who understands the problems from living them, who can design programs that respect dignity instead of demanding humiliation as the price of help." Victoria turned to face him. "I want you as full partner, not just co-director but co-owner. 40% of the foundation, equal voice in how resources get deployed. What do you say?" Marcus stared, processing the offer. I don't know anything about running a foundation. You know everything that matters. You know what it's like to choose between food and medicine, to face eviction while working full-time, to watch someone you love die because the system values profit over people. That knowledge is worth more than any MBA. Victoria's expression held certainty. "I bring money and business operations. You bring wisdom and moral authority. Together we build something neither of us could create alone." Marcus thought about Lily's last words. "Take care of him, and take care of yourself. Don't let grief make you forget you're allowed to be happy." And realized he'd been so focused on honoring her sacrifice through suffering that he'd missed the possibility of honoring it through joy, through partnership with someone who understood loss intimately enough to transform it into purpose. Equal partnership means equal voice. You don't overrule me just because it's your money funding things. Agreed. We decide together or not at all. And I keep working property maintenance. Stay connected to the ground level, see what tenants need directly. Of course, that's where your insight comes from. Victoria extended her hand. Partners. Marcus gripped her hand. Felt calluses meet manicured palm, blue-collar meeting executive class. An alliance built on mutual respect rather than hierarchy. Partners. But I get to keep calling you out when you get too corporate. Victoria's rare smile appeared, transforming her features from ice to something warmer. I'd be disappointed if you didn't. They shook, sealing the agreement, and Marcus felt something shift in his chest. Not healing exactly, Lily's absence would always be a wound that scarred but never fully cleaned it. But purpose, maybe. Direction. The sense that his survival served something beyond, just outlasting the days until death arrived. Inside, Ethan stirred in sleep, coughing once, then settling back into the peaceful breathing of a child who felt safe. Marcus heard it through the open bedroom door, that sound he'd been terrified of losing 6 months ago, and felt gratitude so intense it bordered on pain. Victoria heard it too. Her expression softened, revealing the person beneath the armor, someone who'd lost her brother and spent a decade trying to make sense of senseless loss. Who'd tested strangers to answer impossible questions. Who'd finally learned that redemption came not through understanding why good people suffered, but through ensuring fewer people had to suffer. Thank you. Marcus's voice came out rough. For Ethan, for the job, for seeing me as a person instead of a problem to solve. You saved me more than I saved you. You showed me that wealth without purpose is just accumulated weight, that money matters only when it serves something beyond itself. Victoria leaned against the balcony railing, Chicago glittering beneath them like a promise that might actually be kept. Graham died thinking his life didn't matter because he couldn't escape poverty. You showed me that poverty doesn't determine worth, it's what people do with whatever resources they have that reveals character. My brother was rich in all the ways that count. I was poor in everything except bank accounts. You helped me understand the difference. They stood together as the city breathed around them, two survivors of different catastrophes finding unexpected alliance in the ruins. Not romance, Marcus's heart belonged to Lily's memory and Victoria's belonged to the work she'd made from grief. But partnership, genuine and hard-won, built on the foundation of understanding that some losses never heal but can be transformed into purpose, if you're willing to do the painful work of living beyond them. Months became seasons. The foundation expanded to 23 families monthly, then 50, then 83. Other philanthropists joined, impressed by the model's efficiency and Victoria's ruthless competence at translating resources into outcomes. Marcus split time between property maintenance and foundation work, bringing the perspective of someone who remembered hunger intimately enough to recognize it in others. Ethan won second place at the science fair, started reading 3 grades above level, made friends who didn't mock his past but engaged with his present, grew taller, healthier, more confident in the way children do when the world stops being hostile and starts being navigable. Marcus dated briefly a woman from the VA hospital volunteer program, a teacher from Ethan's school, a fellow electrician who understood the demands of physical labor. But nothing stuck. His heart remained faithful to Lily in ways logic couldn't override dedication to her memory. The one constant in a life that had otherwise transformed entirely. Victoria remained single too. Married to work in the way people become when partnerships with humans feel more complicated than partnerships with purpose. But she smiled more, laughed occasionally, showed up at Ethan's school events and Marcus's apartment for holidays, slowly building something resembling family from the wreckage of the families they'd lost. 2 years after the test, Marcus sat in his office overlooking the Chicago River reviewing applications for the Foundation's housing program. A knock interrupted his focus. Victoria entered without waiting for invitation, carrying 2 cups of coffee, sitting in the chair across from his desk with the comfortable familiarity of someone who'd earned the right to space without permission. "I've been thinking about something." Marcus accepted the coffee. "That's usually dangerous. We need to expand to other cities. The model works. Other places need it, but that means scaling operations, hiring regional directors, establishing partnerships beyond Chicago. It's going to consume more time, more energy. I need to know you're committed." Marcus studied this woman who'd entered his life as a test giver and become something more complex, mentor, partner, friend. "I'm committed to the work, to honoring Lily by making sure other families have choices she didn't. If that means expanding, I'm in. Even if it means 60, 70-hour weeks, even if it means Ethan sees less of you. Ethan understands. He knows why we're doing this. And honestly," Marcus paused, considering how to articulate something he'd only recently understood himself. "Honestly, working this hard for something meaningful is easier than working half as hard for mere survival. Purpose makes the exhaustion bearable in ways desperation never could." Victoria nodded, understanding in ways only someone who'd lived through similar transformation could. "Then let's build something big enough to actually matter. Big enough that 20 years from now people look back and say, this was the moment things started changing." That's ambitious. Ambition is all I know. It's how I survived Graham's death, by building something so consuming I couldn't drown in grief. Victoria's voice carried the weight of years spent running from pain toward purpose. But now I'm not running anymore. I'm building because it matters, not because I'm terrified of stopping. You taught me that. You and Ethan showing me what fighting for something looks like when you're not fighting against yourself. Marcus raised his coffee cup. To building something that matters. Victoria clinked her cup against his. To honoring the people we lost by becoming the people they hoped we'd be. They drank, sealing the commitment, and through the window, Chicago stretched endlessly, millions of people surviving, struggling, occasionally transcending the circumstances that tried to break them. Marcus thought about the man he'd been 2 years ago, so desperate he'd accepted an impossible offer from a stranger testing his character. Thought about where that test had led, not to answers about whether poor people deserved poverty, but to partnership with someone who'd learned that worth couldn't be measured in dollars. Lily's voice echoed in memory, "Promise me you'll keep living. Not just surviving, but actually living. For Ethan, for yourself, for all of us who don't get the chance." And Marcus realized he'd finally painfully kept that promise. He was living, not just existing day to day, not just enduring the weight of her absence, but building something that gave her death meaning beyond grief. That evening, Marcus picked up Ethan from the after-school program, walked home through Chicago streets that felt less hostile, now made dinner while his son did homework at the kitchen table. After they ate and cleaned up together, Ethan produced a school assignment essay about someone who changed his life. "I wrote about you and Victoria." Ethan's voice carried pride and vulnerability, equally mixed. "About how you taught me that helping people is the most important work anyone can do. And how Victoria showed me that having money doesn't make you important. What you do with it does. Can you read it?" Marcus took the essay, reading words his 8-year-old son had crafted with surprising eloquence. The piece wove together Lily's sacrifice, Marcus's determination, Victoria's transformation, and Ethan's own journey from poverty to stability. The final paragraph read, "My mom died so I could live better. My dad works every day to honor that sacrifice. Victoria helps us help other families so they don't have to make impossible choices. Together they're showing me that love isn't just about taking care of yourself or your family. It's about taking care of everyone because we're all connected. My dad says electricity works because everything's connected. You need the right pathways for power to flow. Love works the same way. When people connect to help each other, that's when real power happens." Marcus finished reading with throat too tight for speech. He pulled Ethan close, holding him the way he'd held him the night Lily died, desperately, gratefully knowing that this child was the reason he'd survived everything that tried to break him. "Your mother would be so proud of you." Marcus's voice cracked. "Proud of the person you're becoming. The thinker, the helper, the kid who understands things most adults miss. I learned it from you and Mom. And Victoria." Ethan relaxed into his father's embrace. "Are you and Victoria going to get married?" The question startled a laugh from Marcus. "No, buddy, we're partners in work, not life. Besides, my heart still belongs to your mom. That doesn't change." "That's okay. I just wondered." Ethan pulled back, studying his father with the seriousness only children achieve when they're trying to understand adult complexities. "But you're happy now, right? Not like before when you were always worried and sad." Marcus considered the question, testing his emotional state against memory of those desperate years. "I'm not all the way happy. Still miss your mom every day. Still wish things were different. But yeah, I'm closer to happy than I've been since she died. The foundation helps. Victoria helps. You definitely help. Sometimes happiness isn't about having everything you want. It's about finding purpose in what you have." Ethan nodded like this made perfect sense. That's what I wrote in my essay, that real wealth isn't money, it's loving people and helping them and knowing your life matters. You're smarter than most adults I know. I learned from the best. Ethan grinned, then returned to his homework, leaving Marcus sitting at the kitchen table trying to process how this child who'd been so angry and resentful 2 years ago had transformed into someone who understood wisdom. Most people spent lifetimes failing to grasp. That night after Ethan slept, Marcus stood at his balcony watching Chicago's lights, phone in hand, scrolling through photos of Lily. He'd deleted hundreds after she died, unable to bear seeing her face, but recently he'd recovered them from backup, relearning how to look at her image without drowning in grief, remembering the love without being destroyed by the loss. She smiled from frozen pixels, eternally 38, eternally healthy. In the older photos, eternally wise in ways Marcus still discovered through memory. He whispered to her ghost, knowing it was foolish but necessary. I think I'm doing okay, Lil. Ethan's thriving. I've got work that matters. Victoria and I built something you'd believe in, helping people the way you always wanted to. I'm keeping our promise. Taking care of him, taking care of myself, living instead of just surviving. Lily's face held no answers, but Marcus didn't need answers anymore. He needed permission to keep moving forward, and he chose to believe her smile granted it. Chose to believe that wherever she existed beyond death, she saw what he'd built from the ruins and approved. His phone buzzed. Victoria texting about tomorrow's foundation meeting, asking if he'd reviewed the new housing initiative proposal. Marcus typed a quick confirmation, then added, "Thank you for everything. For seeing me as a partner instead of a problem, for helping me honor Lily the right way." Victoria's response came immediately. "Thank you for teaching me that wealth is meaningless without purpose. Graham would have liked you. You're as stubborn as he was, and that's a compliment." Marcus smiled, pocketed the phone, and returned to the apartment where his son slept peacefully in a room that stayed warm all winter. The journey from that bus station encounter to this moment felt both impossibly long and startlingly swift. 2 years that contained entire lifetimes of change built on the foundation of one woman's grief-driven test and one man's desperate acceptance of impossible help. He'd started this story as Marcus Reed, electrician and single father, so poor he gave his son his last $5 for chips while going hungry himself. He ended it as Marcus Reed Foundation co-director and property manager, still struggling with finances but no longer drowning, still grieving his wife but no longer consumed by loss, still fighting systems that tried to break people like him, but now equipped with resources to actually win some battles. The test had been about measuring worth through spending patterns. But the real measurement, the one that actually mattered, was in what people built from the resources they had, whether those resources were unlimited wealth or just desperate love for a child who needed more than circumstances provided. Marcus had proven something Victoria needed to learn, that character wasn't about avoiding poverty, but about maintaining dignity within it. That worth wasn't determined by bank accounts, but by the choices people made when everything was at stake. That real wealth was measured not in dollars accumulated, but in lives. Touched families, helped systems, challenged love given despite inadequate returns. And in proving that to Victoria, Marcus had proven something to himself, that Lily's sacrifice hadn't been meaningless, that his survival served purpose beyond mere existence. That the man he'd become through the crucible of loss was someone she'd be proud to have loved. He closed the balcony door against Chicago's winter cold and went to bed, falling asleep faster than he had in years, dreaming of electrical circuits and connected pathways, and the way power flowed when everything aligned correctly, exactly like Ethan had written, exactly like love worked when given the right connections to make it useful.